Welcome to the podcast about investing in startups, where existing investors can learn how to get the best deal possible, and those that have never before invested in startups can learn the keys to success from the venture experts. Your host is Nick Moran, and this is The Full Ratchet.
Welcome back for another edition of Investor Stories. On this special segment, the experts describe the most important lesson that they've learned and how that has changed the way they invest. This is the special segment called Lessons Learned. On today's special segment, we have James Hardiman of Data Collective. James, can you tell us a story about a lesson that you've learned, a story that highlights sort of a key lesson that has changed the way you invest?
Yeah. At Data Collective, we focus a lot on the technology. And I think I've come to appreciate that even though the tech is really important, ultimately it's the team. It's the team that matters. And, my reason for that is, we're not operators. We're not going to be in there every day. And so you really need to trust the CEO and the management team to be making kind of optimal decisions all along the way. And if every time, they're making a suboptimal decision or things they're not executing quite as well, I think that can kind of compound over time. And going back to my comments earlier, even the best tech, doesn't necessarily win if it's not paired with excellent execution. And so I think that's a lesson that I've really learned. It's really about the people and the team and kind of building, learning, I guess, to trust them and building that trust. There was one company I invested in where I felt like, the CEO was struggling in execution. And so I wanted to bring in kind of an outside chairman to help, mentor the CEO and help with that. What I think the CEO thought I was doing is maybe trying to bring in someone who would ultimately be the CEO and replace them. And so that, trying to have that conversation was very difficult. And I think the CEO felt, very threatened by this and ultimately refused kind of to take on this chairman.
Yikes.
And that was, I think that was a lesson, that I learned around. I hadn't been good enough about building kind of a trusting relationship with the CEO so that they knew that, my attempt to do this was actually, I thought, in kind of their and the company's best interest. And it was really trying to be helpful. And, I actually didn't have any intention of doing that, replacing them as CEO. But having not spent the time to build that level of trust, I think ultimately made that, kind of a difficult situation.
On today's special segment, we have Nathan Benaich. Nathan, what's one of the most important lessons that you've learned through your experiences as a startup investor?
People matter above everything. I think we've since I've been investing, we've certainly passed on deals which seem to be overpriced or which seem to have not enough evidence around product execution, but instead where the founder was clearly brilliant. And other situations where we've invested in a really intriguing idea, which we think and which others also thought should definitely exist in the world, but where the person was really not the right individual to be building a company in the first place. And so what that sort of triangulates down to is that the entrepreneurs and the management team are definitely the most important players in the equation of people, market, and product. Because as long as markets are big and there's ways of ascertaining that, and that we give entrepreneurs the right resources, both in terms of time and freedom to experiment by giving them enough money to do so, then there's a very high degree of certainty that they will create value. But if they're the wrong people for it, it just won't happen.
Is there a way that you prioritize or evaluate founder product fit or founder market fit?
I'm still looking for the secret sauce. But I think one thing that's true is that as an investor, when you consider companies that are fundraising, it's usually when management teams are quite upbeat because it's all exciting, it's all new. They might have had some traction, and it's one of the only times where you can raise money on the basis of vision. And so it's usually all in the positive context, and people behave in a certain way when things are positive. really, what's important to know is how people behave when things aren't so rosy. And so, I think people have different ways of trying to, I guess, press buttons to see how people react when it hurts, but definitely getting answers to those questions, I think will be, good predictors for how entrepreneurs behave when, and deal with stress and situations which put, their business and the future of their company in more perilous waters versus the more rosy ones when people are fundraising for the first time.
On today's special segment, we have Paul Martino of Bullpen Capital. Paul, can you tell us a story highlighting a critical lesson that's changed your outlook on tech or investing?
Well, I would say one of the most critical lessons I learned, there were two of them, and they were both at Intertrust from two different bosses, who ultimately both became board members and investors in later companies. The first was Duncan Davidson. Duncan I ended up starting Bullpen with. I worked with him at Intertrust, and I worked with him at Sky Pilot. One time he came into my office, was kind of doing my performance review, and he's like, "Look, Paul, you're doing pretty good on this and that, but I got to tell you, you're doing a lot of work, but you're not making a lot of progress." And I was kind of insulted by that. I'm like, "Duncan, what do you mean by that?" He's like, "Look, Paul, you're having fun, you're meeting people, you're a smart kid, you're networking and doing awesome stuff like this and that, but you know what? You had 3 goals to do. So all that awesome work that you did all day, how much actual progress did you make?" I was like, oh shit, this is actually really profound advice. Like, don't confuse work and progress, because it's easy when you're in the flow and you're one of the cool kids and you're in a neat company and it just went public to play company and to do a lot of work. Well, shit, what was the 3 things I needed to do today? And ever since that conversation almost 20 years ago, I've always been goal and metric oriented about what I need to do, as opposed to, am I doing a lot of work today? That was profound advice. And then my next boss after him at Intertrust, a guy named Mark Ishida, who was an OVP up in Seattle, our lead investor in our Series D round of Aggregate Knowledge, he gave me the counterpoint to that. One day I'm in his office, and this is my new boss after Duncan. I'm like, oh, great. He says, "Paul, I'm going to give you a bad review." I was like, oh, man, I'm getting this again. I'm going to get a bad review. Why am I getting a bad review? He said, "Paul, I looked at your calendar for the week, and what I realized on your calendar for the week was there was not a single meeting with any person outside of Intertrust on your calendar. You're in the business development group. If you aren't meeting with at least 2 people unrelated to your day job, you're actually not doing your day job because you're falling behind on what's going on in Silicon Valley." And I was like, dang, shit, man, I got it on both ends. The first guy says, I need to have goals and not confuse work. And the next guy goes, one of my goals has to be meeting people and staying in the ecosystem and on top of stuff. 2 of the best pieces of advice I gave. I was fortunate enough to have the late Bill Campbell as my CEO coach. And so I try and instill these same kind of lessons in my CEOs that Bill encompassed in me. And those are 2 of the lessons I learned, both from Mark and from Duncan. And I find that kind of coaching to the CEO is super valuable, because little lessons like that can change your entire career trajectory.
So now that you run your own shop and you don't report up, how do you still have those mentors and those people to help sort of frame and guide?
Oh, well, yeah, you've got to have them. And yes, as much as you run the shop, and the culture emanates from the corner office, I get all that. If you're not trying to improve yourself, and if you yourself are not your own toughest critic, you shouldn't be sitting in the corner office, right? I mean, so I'm never satisfied myself, which is point 1 of it. And then 2, you better have an advisor group around you who can go tell you when you're screwing up.
Yeah.
So we have a group that we call Full Pen, and our Full Pen group is our 10 industry advisors. We've had people like Josh Ellman from Greylock and Shruti Gandhi, who runs Array Ventures, and all sorts of people in the venture industry. And we have operating people like Chris Tolles, who's the CEO of Topics. That whole group comes into our office 3 hours every month. We interview a couple companies. We might have a portfolio CEO come in. We talk about what's going on in the industry. And that 3 hours is 3 of the best hours we spend every month, because it keeps us grounded. Hard questions get asked to us, and the introspection required on our business happens. And that is my favorite day every month in the office. And the energy that we have by having that extended group of people provide that kind of guidance can't be understated.
I like it. I'm going to have to build in process myself. That will conclude this installment of Investor Stories. If you're enjoying the program and would like to see it continue, take a moment and leave a 5-star review in iTunes. Also, if you'd like updates on new content from TFR as well as the top 10 VC articles every week, go to fullratchet.net and sign up for the newsletter. Okay, that will wrap things up for today. Until next time, over-prepare, choose carefully, and invest confidently. Thanks for joining me.